December 7, 1941. The morning was calm. Battleships slept under a quiet Hawaiian sun. The air was still. The sea, mirror smooth. No one knew the sky was about to break. Then a hum. Faint at first, then roaring. Engines. Shadows. Wings. The rising sun struck without warning. Zero fighters tore across the clouds, fast, precise, merciless. In seconds, the Pacific turned to fire. Torpedoes slammed into steel. Arizona exploded, the harbor burned black. Amid smoke and chaos, one message echoed through history. Tora! 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 7:55 a.m., December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor, Oahu, Hawaii. In the bay lie 8 battleships of the U.S. Pacific Fleet: Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, Nevada, Tennessee, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. More than 8,000 sailors aboard. The Pacific is calm, almost unnaturally so. The air is heavy with salt, oil, and routine. On the deck of the West Virginia, Bosun John Finn cleans the barrel of his Browning M2. On the California, a mechanic checks the fuel gauge. In the barracks, a radio hums out. Sunday morning serenade. Laughter, cards, coffee, and sunlight. A perfect Sunday. Then, a low hum. Barely audible at first, like a far-off storm. Metal lockers rattle, windows tremble. A sentry on the tower squints at the horizon, dark shapes cutting across the morning sky. B-17s? He wonders aloud. But they aren't American. They are Mitsubishi A6 M20s, the most agile fighters in the world, armed with twin 20mm Type 99 cannons. Behind them fly Nakajima B-5N Kates, each carrying a Type 91 torpedo, fitted with wooden stabilizers to skim the shallow harbor. Higher above, Aichi D-3A Vals, dive bombers roll into formation, each loaded with 800-kilogram armor-piercing bombs, modified naval shells built to crack steel hulls. A single whistle cuts the air, then impact. Water erupts skyward as a Type 91 torpedo enters the bay at a 22-degree angle, striking the Oklahoma broadside. The blast folds metal like paper. Another torpedo hits West Virginia. Moments later, Arizona takes a direct hit. A converted 16-inch shell slams into her forward magazine, igniting over 1 million pounds of gunpowder. The explosion rips the ship apart. A column of fire shoots 100 meters into the sky. The shockwave shatters glass across the harbor. Men are hurled into the sea. From the roof of the officers' quarters, Lieutenant Frederick Lombard of the 98th Squadron watches the nightmare unfold. "This is no drill," he shouts into the loudspeaker, but his voice drowns in the roar of engines. The air turns black, smoke, debris, burning oil. Fire trucks race straight into falling bombs. On the Nevada, the crew struggles to get underway, engines screaming. But the next wave of Vals dives from 8,000 feet. One bomb hits near the boiler room. Nevada runs aground, blocking the harbor channel. On West Virginia, John Finn drags his machine gun to an anti-aircraft post. Shrapnel tears his shoulder, but he keeps firing. Empty shells clatter around his feet. A Zero dives straight at him. He squeezes the trigger until the gun overheats. Finn takes 21 wounds before collapsing, but never lets go of the grip. Overhead, 1 Zero bursts into flames, crashing near Dock 2. Its pilot, Petty Officer Ida Nakajima, draws his katana seconds before impact. Nearby, a fuel depot ignites. A rolling wall of fire sweeps along the shoreline, swallowing everything in its path. The water of the harbor boils, slick with burning oil. Smoke towers hundreds of meters high, blotting out the sun. Through the chaos, a coded message crackles over the Japanese frequency 5820 kHz. Tora! 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 The signal that the attack has succeeded. Tokyo, December 1941. The air smells of ink, cigarettes, and cold steel. On a long table in the headquarters of the Imperial Navy lie maps of the Pacific Ocean. Red lines stretch from Japan to Hawaii, arteries of an empire preparing to strike. Admiral Isoroki Yamamoto sits motionless, his face calm, but his fingers tap against the edge of the table, faint, rhythmic, like the ticking of a clock. Before him lies an intelligence report. U.S. oil reserves, limitless. Their industry can rebuild a fleet within a year. He knows it's true. I can run wild for 6 months, he says quietly. But after that, darkness. He doesn't want this war, but it's already unstoppable. Since the U.S. oil embargo, Japan's industry has been suffocating. The fleet's 6 aircraft carriers consume over 12,000 tons of fuel each day. Without new supplies, the empire will collapse. In the war rooms of the General Staff, the decision is made: strike first. Not a battle, a shock. A single, surgical blow that will force America to back away. Thus is born Operation Z. The strike force will include 6 carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, escorted by more than 30 ships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. The combined air wing numbers 353 aircraft, 43 HED-3A VAL dive bombers, 144 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, and 131 Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bombers. Each modified for a long-range strike, fuel capacity extended to 2,200 kilometers, each equipped with emergency beacons. But there's one problem: Pearl Harbor's waters are too shallow. Standard torpedoes hit the bottom before reaching their targets. At the Kure Naval Arsenal, engineers conduct hundreds of experiments. They attach wooden fins to Type 91 torpedoes, reducing entry speed and adding modified steering vanes. Now, the weapon enters water at a 22-degree angle, travels 700 meters horizontally, and detonates with a 0.8-second delay. One engineer, Kenziro Matsui, notes in his diary, "We have built a fish that swims in death." Pilots train relentlessly at the Kisarazu airfield. On the sand, they've built full-scale wooden replicas of American ships. Every attack is practiced from 3,000 meters altitude. By late October, accuracy reaches within 10 meters. Instructors measure every dive angle, every degree of approach. On the hangar floor, a chalk line marks USS Arizona. The young men laugh, but the laughter feels hollow. At night, after drills, they gather by the radio. Commander Mitsuo Fukuda tells them, "We'll strike while they drink their coffee. They won't even have time to curse us." Submarines I-19 and I-25 prowl near Hawaii, recording photographs of the anchored U.S. fleet. In the center, Arizona. Nearby, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California. The ships stand so close that their wings nearly touch on the photos. To the Japanese planners, this isn't a base, it's a gift from the gods. Meanwhile, Hawaii lives in Saturday peace. Children eat ice cream on Honolulu streets. Radios play Chattanooga Choo Choo. Sailors play baseball on the lawns of Hickam Field. In the command office, Admiral Husband Kimmel reads a report. Possible Japanese movement in the South China Sea. Hawaii isn't mentioned. In the cryptologic unit, Lieutenant Joseph Rockefeller's team intercepts fragments of the JN-25 code. On December 3rd, a phrase stands out. Nitaka Yama Nobor 1208, climb Mount Nitaka on December 8th. Rockefeller recognizes it as an activation order, but Washington remains silent. It's like before a storm. He writes in his journal. When the sea is calm, and the air is too still. November 26th. Haidokapa Bay, Kuril Islands. Temperature, -3 degrees Celsius. Northern wind, 20 knots. The sea, calm like glass. At 0600, the Akagi leads the task force out to sea, followed by the others. Lights extinguished. Even wristwatches wrapped in cloth to avoid reflection. Radio silence absolute. The ship's log reads, "Training exercises." In truth, this is the beginning of the largest naval operation in human history. Mitsuo Fukuda stands on deck. His fingers clutch the railing, cold steel biting his skin. Ahead lies darkness. Behind, a homeland he may never see again. He recalls Yamamoto's words. This war has no victors. Beside him, Captain Hasegawa whispers a short prayer. No one answers. Only the sound of the waves. For 12 days, the fleet pushes across the northern Pacific. 3-meter waves. Water temperature barely 2 degrees. No radio transmissions. Any signal could mean death. The pilots rehearse takeoff drills using paper rolls instead of torpedoes. When someone coughs, others glare. Even sound is an enemy. December 5th, Pearl Harbor. Battleships rest in neat rows. Arizona to the right, Oklahoma beside her. At the airfields, planes are parked wingtip to wingtip, easier to guard, but suicidal if attacked. On radar duty, Private George Elliott detects multiple aircraft on the northern horizon. Seeing movement, he reports over the phone. The response: probably our B-17's inbound. Go grab breakfast. Click. Line dead. December 7th, 3 a.m. aboard Akagi, total darkness. Pilots inspect parachutes one last time. One slips an envelope under his seat. If I don't return, raise our sun strong. Another crosses himself quietly. Officers walk between the rows, placing a hand on each shoulder. Remember, today, the Emperor watches you. No one speaks. Only breath and heartbeat. 4 o'clock, engines ignite. The roar of Nakajima Sakai engines echoes for miles. The deck trembles under the power. One by one, aircraft launch into the night. Cockpit temperature below freezing, oxygen scarce. Course 183 degrees, altitude 3,000 meters. In the headphones, silence, only breathing. 6 o'clock, the first glimpse of Oahu. The rising sun paints the wings gold. Below, Pearl Harbor, quiet, unaware. On shore, children, dogs, the smell of coffee. Fukuda looks down, gripping the transmitter. His voice steady, though his chest tightens. Target in sight. 7:49, the formation passes north of the island. 7:53, he presses the key. Tora! 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 It's not just a code. It's a sentence. 7:55, the first torpedo enters the water at a 22-degree angle. 3 seconds later, impact. Oklahoma heaves upward. Boiling water, fire, steel. Then another. And another. The chain of death has begun. In Tokyo, a signal officer notes the time. 7:53, attack commenced. Yamamoto stands by the window, his coffee cold. He doesn't smile. We have achieved a brilliant victory, he says quietly, and awakened a sleeping giant. 7:55 a.m. Pearl Harbor. The palms stand still, the sea calm, the morning sun bright over the base. In the barracks, someone reads a newspaper, someone laughs at a joke on the radio. A sailor on the Arizona polishes the metal nameplate on the deck. Another writes in his diary. Just another Sunday morning. Even the tea hasn't cooled yet. Then the sky begins to hum. At first, it's faint, like a distant engine. Then it grows, deep and heavy, vibrating through glass and bone. On the northern horizon, dark dots, growing larger by the second. What is that? Asks radar operator George Elliott at the Opana station. He sees a formation moving in from the north. He calls the duty officer. Don't worry, comes the reply. Probably our B-17s. The line clicks dead. Minutes later, the first wave of Japanese aircraft crosses the Hawaiian coast. 183 planes, 49 Val dive bombers, 51 Kate torpedo bombers, 43 Zero fighters. Commander, Captain Mitsuo Fukuda. His plane leads the formation. Into the microphone he says, "They suspect nothing. Begin the attack." 7:53, a short signal cuts through the static. Tora! 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 Not just a code. A verdict. The first torpedo hits the water at a 22-degree angle. Its Type 91 Mod .2 engine roars as it skims the surface, runs 700 meters, and slams into the Oklahoma. The steel bends, the hull splits. Within 12 seconds the ship lists, within 30, it rolls over. Of the 1,301 men aboard, most never escape. The next torpedo hits the West Virginia. The time interval between detonations, 5.8 seconds. The Japanese had drilled that precision for months. Lieutenant Kazuo Sakuma once wrote in his notebook, "We must strike perfectly. This isn't battle, it's surgery." On board West Virginia, Bosun John Finn drops his spoon, grabs a Browning M2 machine gun, and drags it onto the open deck. His face is covered in oil, eyes burning from smoke. "I saw the sky falling on us," he would later recall. Shrapnel rips through him more than 20 times, but he keeps firing, standing in the flames. 8 o'clock. The Arizona erupts. An armor-piercing bomb, Type 99 No. 80 Mk.5, a converted 410mm naval shell, drops through 4 decks before detonating in the ammunition magazine. The explosion tears the ship apart. Fire shoots 100 meters into the air. The heat wave scorches sailors on nearby ships. Paint bubbles on the Tennessee, steel groans on the Maryland. "The blast was so loud my ears went numb," remembered radio operator James Coriel. "We thought the world had ended." At the airfields, hell. Wheeler Field, Hickam Bellows. Japanese planes dived to 50 meters, strafing rows of parked aircraft. Their Nakajima Sakai 12 engines scream, 940 horsepower of death. Their 7.7 mm and 20 mm rounds rip through the air at 600 shots per minute. A rain of metal. At Wheeler Field, Lieutenants Kenneth Taylor and George Welch sprint to their P-40 Warhawks. One engine starts on the third try. They take off straight into the firestorm. "I wasn't thinking," Taylor would later say. "I just saw them destroying my home." He shoots down 2 planes. Welch, one more. 8:20, the second wave. 171 aircraft. New targets, fuel depots, dry docks, airfields. Val dive bombers descend from 3,000 meters at 50 degrees. In Lieutenant Tatsuo Ichiharo's cockpit, a voice crackles over the radio. "Target the tanks." His bomb hits fuel tank number 8. 15,000 tons of aviation gasoline ignite in a single flash. The smoke column rises 1,000 feet. On the California, a fuel tank explodes. On the Nevada, the hull is breached, but the captain orders ahead. The burning battleship moves slowly through the harbor, a symbol of defiance captured forever on film. On shore, Cook Doris Miller, who has never manned a gun, grabs a .50 caliber and opens fire. His burst hit a Kate that crashes into the harbor. He becomes the first black sailor in U.S. Navy history to receive the Navy Cross. 8:45. Radio operators tried to send a desperate message. "Air raid Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill." But the lines are down. Around them, smoke, screams, gunfire. "We couldn't see the enemy, only a black sky," wrote Lieutenant William Hall. 9:15. A few Zeros still circle the harbor. Pilot Yoichi Tomonaga sees the burning Arizona below and whispers, "We did it." Then a bullet shatters his engine. Flames engulf the cockpit. He does not eject. His plane dives into the sea. 9:45. Silence. The air smells of oil and steel. The harbor is black, the sun pale. Ships are broken skeletons on the water. 2,403 dead, 1,178 wounded, 21 ships damaged, 188 aircraft destroyed. Aboard the Akagi, Fukuda removes his headset. "Mission accomplished," he says quietly. On the bridge, Admiral Nagumo stares ahead. "We did what we must. Now the rest is history." In Tokyo, a coded message is sent. "Brilliant success. The enemy is annihilated." Yamamoto listens to the report but does not smile. He looks out the window, the coffee on his desk gone cold. "We have awakened a sleeping giant," he says softly, "and filled him with a terrible resolve." 9:55 a.m. Pearl Harbor. The air is heavy, thick with smoke, oil, and burning paint. The sun glows weakly behind a ceiling of black haze. What used to be the pride of the Pacific Fleet now looks like a graveyard of iron and flame. The Arizona burns like a torch, her forward magazine detonated, leaving a crater of molten steel. Flames hiss as they meet the sea. Rescue launches cut through layers of oil. The surface of the harbor gleams black and rainbow, fuel mixed with blood. Sailors, half-blinded and burned, haul others onto rafts. From inside the overturned Oklahoma, metallic pounding echoes. 32 men are trapped. "They're alive down there," one diver whispers. But cutting through steel takes hours, and every torch risks igniting the fumes. 3 days later, the tapping stops. At Ford Island, the battleship West Virginia still smolders. The water around her is boiling, dotted with fragments of lifeboats and uniforms. A diver from the Vestal recalls later, "The oil was so thick you could walk on it. You could still hear the ships groaning like they were alive." By noon, the scale of destruction is beyond comprehension. Battleships Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California sunk. Nevada beached and burning after trying to escape the harbor. Tennessee and Maryland, damaged. 21 ships crippled or destroyed, 188 aircraft obliterated, 2,403 Americans killed. Inside his office, Admiral Husband Kimmel stares through the shattered glass. A piece of shrapnel has grazed his cheek. Blood runs down his collar unnoticed. He watches the smoke rise and murmurs, "It's my fleet, it's gone." Behind him, an aide says softly, "Sir, Washington's on the line." Kimmel doesn't answer. 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The White House. President Franklin D. Roosevelt listens to a radio transmission from Honolulu. The operator's voice breaks in static. "We are under heavy attack, ships burning, many casualties." The room is silent except for the hiss of the radio. Roosevelt's jaw tightens. He looks up slowly. "Get me Congress tomorrow." That night, he drafts his address himself. The pen scratches the paper. December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. He pauses over the word infamy, then underlines it once. His hand trembles slightly. The next day, the House chamber is silent as he speaks. Cameras click. When he finishes, the room explodes in applause. Only one vote stands against war. At 4:10 p.m., the United States declares war on Japan. Across America, something fundamental shifts. Men line up outside recruitment centers. Women flood factories. Newspapers scream headlines in red ink. "Japan attacks U.S. War!" At the same hour in Tokyo, crowds celebrate. Banners wave. Newspapers proclaim, "Divine victory!" Loudspeakers blast martial anthems. But inside Navy headquarters, the mood is sober. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives the first operational report. It's a success, beyond expectation. But one line freezes him. "Enemy aircraft carriers not present." Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, still at large. He closes the report and sets down his pen. "Then," he says quietly, "we have achieved a brilliant success, and an irreversible mistake." Later, in his diary, he writes, "We have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve." In Pearl Harbor, the work of the living begins. Salvage divers enter compartments filled with oil, corpses, and debris. The stench is unbearable. They weld, pump, and pray. Many are volunteers. On West Virginia, divers recover 35 bodies. Some are found still gripping the triggers of their guns. On California, 20 sailors are discovered at their stations. A diver writes later, "They were still doing their duty when the sea took them." The Arizona burns for 2 days. When the wreck finally cools, engineers notice a slow, steady leak of oil, thin black bubbles rising to the surface, shimmering in the sun. Locals begin to call them the tears of the Arizona. Hospitals overflow. Nurses tear curtains and tablecloths for bandages. Blood donors line the streets. "We ran out of gauze," one nurse recalls. "We used anything white." Detroit stops building cars. It starts building bombers. The Ford plant at Willow Run produces one B-24 Liberator every hour. Boeing's factories hum around the clock. By mid-1943, the United States launches one news ship every 3 days. Women take the places of men, riveters, welders, mechanics, engineers. Their hands are blistered, their faces streaked with grease, but they keep the lines moving. In 1 year, American industry outproduces Japan's entire fleet. At the same time, new aircraft roll out of hangars. The P-38 Lightning, the B-17 Flying Fortress, the B-25 Mitchell. The sound of engines replaces silence. Across the Pacific, Japan's early triumph begins to feel fragile. Doris Miller, the cook who manned a machine gun aboard the West Virginia, becomes a national hero. Newspapers print his photo with the caption, "Hero of Pearl Harbor." When asked about it, he says simply, "I just pulled the trigger." John Finn survives 21 wounds. When reporters ask what he remembers, he says, "Hot, loud, and too damn close." He will live to receive the Medal of Honor, the first in the Pacific War. Lieutenants Kenneth Taylor and George Welch score the first American air victories of World War II. Their P-40s return shot full of holes. When Taylor lands, oil dripping from his engine, he says, "We'll get them all, one by one." These names, Miller, Finn, Taylor, become the first faces of a nation that refuses to kneel. As days turn to weeks, the fires die, but the smell of oil never leaves. It seeps into the sand, the uniforms, the memory of everyone who survived. Across the harbor, the Nevada still lies on the beach, her flag torn but flying. The wrecks are patched, raised, repaired. Even in ruins, America rebuilds. The Japanese pilots who once laughed at sleeping America never returned to this place. Their victory, perfect on paper, became the spark of their own destruction. For the United States, Pearl Harbor becomes more than a wound. It becomes a vow. Posters appear on every wall. Remember Pearl Harbor. Children memorize it. Soldiers write it on their helmets. Factories stamp it on the sides of bombs. Years later, divers return to the wreck of the Arizona. The ship remains a tomb for 1,177 men. Oil still seeps from the hull, tiny black pearls rising, one after another. Scientists estimate it will leak for another 100 years. Tourists stand in silence. Veterans remove their caps. The water shimmers gold under the Hawaiian sun, calm and warm, as if nothing ever happened. But beneath December that stillness lies the memory of the morning when the Pacific still caught fire, but America no longer mourns forever. It moves. In factories from Detroit to Seattle, from Pittsburgh to San Diego, steel begins to sing. The silence after Pearl Harbor is replaced by the rhythm of engines, hammers, and the hiss of welders. The United States, a nation built on production, is turning itself into an arsenal. Within days, President Roosevelt signs Executive Order 9024, creating the War Production Board. Overnight, car plants become tank lines. Typewriter factories start making machine guns. Henry Ford's engineers redesign assembly belts to turn out a B-24 Liberator every hour. In Los Angeles, shipyards expand so fast that wooden houses are demolished to make room for slipways. By the summer of 1942, the United States produces more steel than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. The numbers are staggering. 297,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, 2.6 million machine guns, each one a promise whispered over the ruins of Pearl Harbor. Young men flood the bases. At Camp Pendleton, new recruits march through rain with wooden rifles. In Kansas, B-17 pilots practice bombing runs over fields of wheat. On every coast, civil defense drills echo through the night. In New York, lights go out at 9 p.m., blackout. Across the continent, the phrase, "Remember Pearl Harbor," becomes a battle cry carved into helmets, scrawled on letters home. Among them are names that will define the coming storm: Doolittle, Nimitz, Halsey, Doolittle's men. Ordinary citizens only months before, now transformed into the instruments of vengeance. Early January 1942. Washington, D.C. In a quiet room of the Navy building, Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle spreads a map across the table. He points to Japan's eastern coast. "If we can hit Tokyo," he says, We can show them what they started. The idea seems impossible. Bombers flying off aircraft carriers had never been done. But the Navy's newest ship, the USS Hornet, may just be large enough. They choose 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers, stripped of armor, loaded with extra fuel tanks. The plan: launch from the Hornet, strike Tokyo, and land in China. The mission is top secret. Even the pilots don't know their destination. Doolittle's men train in Eglin Field, Florida, practicing short takeoffs on runways barely 450 feet long. The instructors mark the tarmac with white chalk lines, the exact length of an aircraft carrier's deck. Every second counts. They said it couldn't be done. Pilot Richard Cole later recalls. That's why we did it. April 1, 1942. The Hornet leaves San Francisco, carrying 16 bombers lashed to her deck. Sailors paint over the tail numbers. The task force rendezvous with Admiral Halsey's Enterprise in the middle of the Pacific. 2 carriers, escorted by cruisers and destroyers, a moving city of vengeance. On April 18th, a Japanese patrol boat spots them. The order is immediate: launch now. The bombers roll forward through spray and wind, engines screaming against the gale. Doolittle's B-25 is first. As his wheels leave the deck, the entire crew on the carrier cheers. Hours later, the first American bombs fall on Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya. Smoke curls above the imperial capital. Not much damage, but the psychological impact is enormous. For the first time, Japanese citizens hear air raid sirens over their own homeland. In Tokyo, air defenses panic. Anti-aircraft guns fire wildly. The radio falls silent for hours. The imperial palace goes dark. Prime Minister Tojo, pale with fury, orders mass arrests across the city, anyone suspected of spreading defeatism. But nothing can hide the truth: America has struck back. Yamamoto listens to the report aboard his flagship Yamato. He closes his eyes. It has begun, he whispers. The giant moves. Only one of the 16 planes reaches safety. The rest crash along the Chinese coast. Pilots are hunted, captured, or killed. Doolittle believes the mission has failed. They'll court-martial me for losing 16 bombers, he tells his crew. But in Washington, Roosevelt reads the report and smiles faintly. No, Jimmy. You just gave America its first good news of the war. In China, villagers risk execution to hide the downed crews. Japanese retaliation is brutal: entire towns burned, thousands killed. It's a tragedy buried for decades, but every survivor knew the world had changed. Japan's aura of invincibility was gone. By June 1942, Admiral Chester Nimitz has rebuilt the Pacific Fleet. New carriers, Enterprise, Yorktown, Hornet, patrol the ocean once dominated by the rising sun American codebreakers. The same team once ignored before Pearl Harbor now intercept messages revealing a target: Midway. In a dark room in Pearl Harbor, Joseph Rockefeller deciphers the final clue. The Japanese call it AF. He sends one line to Nimitz: AF is Midway. The trap is set. June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway begins. At dawn, Japanese planes dive on Midway's runways. But as their decks are rearmed for a second strike, American dive bombers appear from 20,000 feet. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, are burning. A fourth, Hiryu, sinks hours later. The empire that once seemed unstoppable loses its sword arm. 4 carriers destroyed, over 250 aircraft gone, the cream of Japan's pilots lost forever. When Nimitz receives the final signal, enemy carriers sunk, he exhales, lights his pipe, and says only, "This is for Pearl Harbor." Factories roar. Fleets multiply. Every ship lost in Pearl Harbor is replaced, stronger, faster, deadlier. By 1944, American bombers rain fire on Japan. But that's still ahead. For now, in the wreck of the Arizona, oil still rises, black drops on golden water. Above them, seagulls circle. The ocean is calm again, but something vast and relentless has awakened. The sleeping giant is no longer dreaming. He is walking. Spring 1943. The South Pacific. In the dense jungle of Bougainville Island, a Japanese radio operator receives a coded message from Tokyo. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto is scheduled to inspect forward bases. He flies by the clock, always punctual, always precise, a man who once set the rhythm of war. But this time, the clock is ticking against him. American intelligence intercepts the transmission. The operation is codenamed Vengeance. Thanks to the same cryptographers once ignored before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. now knows Yamamoto's exact route, down to the minute. At Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, pilots of the 339th Fighter Squadron receive the order. Target, Admiral. Execute. They take off in P-38 Lightnings, the only fighters with the range to reach him. April 18, 1943, exactly 1 year after the Doolittle raid, the sky hums once again. Captain Tom Lanfer spots two Mitsubishi, Betty, bombers escorted by Zeros. He pushes the throttles forward, the twin-engine Lightnings screaming as they dive. Target in sight, he calls. The burst of tracers cuts through the morning air. Yamamoto's plane bursts into flame, spiraling into the jungle canopy. When search parties later find the wreckage, the admiral still sits in his seat, his hand resting on his ceremonial sword. A single bullet through the heart. The man who awoke the giant has become its shadow. Japan retreats, but refuses to surrender. In 1944, American B-29 superfortresses reach Tokyo. Colonel Curtis LeMay changes the rules. No more high-altitude precision, only low-level, nighttime firebombing. On March 9, 1945, 334 B-29s depart from Guam. Each carries 7 tons of napalm. At 12:08 a.m., the first incendiary clusters fall over Sumida. Within minutes, the wind spreads the fire, turning the city into a furnace. Temperatures rise above 1,000 degrees. Wooden houses vanish in minutes. The firestorm consumes Tokyo in a single night. Over 100,000 die, more than at Hiroshima. Pilots returning from the raid can see the glow from 200 miles away. This isn't war, one whispers. This is the end of the world. On Iwo Jima, U.S. Marines raise the flag atop Mount Suribachi. Joe Rosenthal's camera captures the moment, the image that defines the war. But beyond the frame, hell continues. 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 surrender. Every cave, every yard of black volcanic sand is taken at the cost of blood. When the battle ends, the island is nothing but charred rock and silence. Then comes Okinawa. 1,900 kamikaze attacks, 36 ships sunk, 12,000 Americans dead, 100,000 Japanese, soldiers and civilians alike. It is the storm before the silence. Franklin Roosevelt dies before it's over, and his successor, Harry Truman, receives the decision even Yamamoto feared: end the war in one blow. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima. A clear sky. At 31,000 feet, the Enola Gay opens its bomb bay doors. Inside, little boy. 5 seconds after release, the world turns white. The fireball reaches 4,000 degrees. The city dissolves in light. 140,000 will die by year's end. 3 days later, Nagasaki follows. Emperor Hirohito speaks to his people for the first time. We must endure the unendurable. Japan surrenders. September 2, 1945. Tokyo Bay. Aboard the battleship USS Missouri, General Douglas MacArthur stands before a table of documents. Around him, representatives of every Allied power. Captain Mamoru Shigemitsu signs for the Empire of Japan. He pauses, holding the pen a moment longer than necessary. It is not just a signature, it is the end of an age. Outside, the sea is calm. The empire that once dreamed of eternal dawn has set. Tokyo is rubble. Ash drifts through the air like snow. The canals run gray with soot and oil. The war is over, but its echo remains. America begins the occupation, not with vengeance, but with reconstruction, roads, schools, factories. The giant does not destroy, it rebuilds. Its former enemy will rise again, not as a conqueror, but as a partner. And far across the ocean, in the quiet waters of Pearl Harbor, the battleship Arizona still rests on the seabed. From its hull, drops of oil rise slowly to the surface. Locals call them the tears of the Arizona. Above, the flag flutters in the wind, whispering like the breath of those still below. The Pacific is calm once more, but it is a different calm, the kind that follows thunder. If this episode sent chills down your spine, hit the like button. Tell us in the comments what struck you the most, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because this is only the beginning of a long journey into the darkest pages of history.